And welcome back to the OHO podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Buckeye Boggs. That man over there, that's the wild man, Chris Wilds. And this is our Iowa preview. We will be joined shortly by the 12 Saturdays podcast, our sister podcast in the College Huddle. Make sure you go over to thecollegehuddle.com and check out our podcast along with 80 other podcasts from around the country, including 12 Saturdays, the Iowa Associate or
We're up to
Representative.
80?
Yeah, we're close to that. I think so.
Wow. You're on
Yeah.
a roll.
Yeah, here we are, man. We did lose one. Mississippi State's no longer a part, but they
After that
took
game versus Toledo, they decided to go hide.
they took their cowbells and went somewhere else. So, but we'll figure that out in the off season. But yeah, we're doing great. So head on over to thecollegehuddle.com and check that out. We're also the official Ohio State podcast of Scarlet and Game. Go over to scarletandgame.com. If you don't like the way we look, you can listen to the podcast over at scarletandgame.com. Just click on podcast, and they have a link provided for you. You can download and listen to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts, my friends. All right, Chris. So this Saturday at 3:30 on CBS, if you're not going to the game, it is the Buckeyes and the Hawkeyes. And big game. Hawkeyes come into this game, I believe, 3-1 on the season.
Mhm.
Ohio State is 4-0. Iowa's lone loss this year is a last-second field goal from in-state rival Iowa State, who is still undefeated and ranked in the top 20 as of this recording on Tuesday evening of game week. If you look back at the last 10 games Ohio State and Iowa have played, Chris, you will see Ohio State is 8-2 in those games. Um, and you can also see that every one of these games that has been played in Columbus, Ohio, has been a win for the Buckeyes. When we go to Iowa City, it's not gone as well, although we do have some wins in Iowa City. But the last 5 times we have traveled to Iowa City, Ohio State has come away with only 3 of those 5 wins. The 2 losses being in 2004, Jim Tressel's team lost
Mhm.
33-7, and then the 2017 heartbreaker where Iowa just put a hurting. That was probably Urban Meyer's worst loss
But
ever.
that wasn't a heartbreaker. That was a beatdown they put on it
Yeah, that
on
was a curb stomping.
Ohio State. If I remember it, that's the game where I said I was going to be surprised if Haskins could lift his arm afterwards because didn't he throw 58 passes or something like that in that
No,
game?
that was before Haskins.
Oh, that was before
That's
Haskins. Yeah,
that's Barrett.
that's Barrett.
JT Barrett started the
Well,
game by throwing a pick
God,
six.
that's right. I don't want what game. I'm thinking of.
Purdue.
Anyhow,
You're
yes,
thinking
Purdue.
Purdue. Yeah, which was 2018.
They both stink so bad that it's hard
Yeah.
to keep them straight.
And if you recall, that 2017 Iowa loss was right after the fourth quarter comeback against Penn
Yes,
State
Penn
in the
State.
shoe.
Yeah, that was the big letdown game after we had all but secured our ticket to the playoff.
Yeah, looking at the numbers for this, Ohio State leads the series, Chris, 47-15. There are 3 ties involved in that. The last loss to Iowa was that 2017 24-55 defeat. Last meeting in Columbus was 2 years ago in 2022. That happens to be the last time the Hawkeyes and Buckeyes did battle. That was a 55-10 shellacking. And then the largest margin of victory for Ohio State came in 1950. Holy smokes, Woody Hayes, 83-21. You want to talk about a beatdown? Hanging 83 on a fellow Big Ten opponent. That's some curb stomping if there ever was any. Largest margin of defeat, that was that 2017 loss that Urban suffered. Ohio State's longest win streak over Iowa was 16 games that took place between the years of 1963 and 1980. The longest win streak that Iowa has had, on the contrary to Ohio State's 16, is 2, and they've done that twice. They did it the first 2 times these teams played in 1922 and 1923, and then they did it again in 1959 and 1960. Ryan Day's record against Iowa is 1-0. It was that a win 2 years ago in 2022, Chris, the game that we were there. And
Hmm.
then Kirk Ferentz' record against Ohio State is 2-9. So he does have two wins. He has the win over Urban Meyer in 2017, and he did beat Jim Tressel one time. Came close a couple other times of beating Tress. Went to overtime one time, but Tressel ended up beating Kirk Ferentz much more than Ferentz defeated Tress. So Kirk Ferentz's record is 2-9 overall against the
That,
Buckeyes.
that's a little bit surprising, Eric. You'd think somebody who'd been coaching since God was a teenager would have more than 2 wins versus Ohio State, but I mean, come on. I would have thought he would. Was he not the coach when who was it? Was it Wesleyan that beat Ohio State? I think it was early on.
Iowa Wesleyan, Kenyon College, Oberlin.
Yeah,
Last time
Oberlin. Yeah.
Oberlin was the last in-state opponent the Ohio State lost to.
But I mean, one of Ohio State's first losses was Ohio Wesleyan, was it not?
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
that was the first game they ever had was against Ohio
Yeah.
Wesleyan here in Delaware, Ohio. I can take you to the spot. Anyways, so Iowa's going to present some interesting things for the
Mhm.
Buckeyes to go up against. Would you like to talk a little bit about where we're at statistically, maybe going into this game, Chris?
Sure, absolutely. So honestly, Ohio State has amazing balance offensively. If we come in as a team, 1,231 passing yards, 908 rushing yards. We're averaging about 9.5 yards per pass, just over 6.5 yards per carry. If you look at what we've done as far as individually, I mean, Will Howard comes in obviously leading the team passing, 72 of 105, 1,039 yards. He has 8 touchdowns versus 2 interceptions, one which was just horrible, but the other one, very forgivable. He's only been sacked one time this year, Eric. That's pretty good. Remember that Michigan State team we just faced came in with 15 sacks on the season. That was a serious defense. Um, Rushing attack wise, Quinshawn Judkins, Travion Henderson. It's like a two-headed monster. Quinshawn's leading the team right now with 390 yards rushing. However, Travion's, right on, well, not right on his heels, about 100 yards back with 276 yards rushing. Um, Combined, they have 9 TDs. Overall passing, we have 10 TDs. Rushing, 15 TDs. Um, so obviously, I think we're seeing the Chip Kelly influence playing out considerably already on the season. Uh, Leading receiver, this may surprise you, is actually number of receptions 21 by Emeka Egbuka, 19 by Jeremiah Smith. But Eric, only 2 yards separate them. Jeremiah's got 364 yards to lead the team on the season. Egbuka's got 362 yards.
Where's
And
Carnell Tate at?
Carnell Tate is third with 14 receptions and 219 yards. All three of these guys have seen the end zone, obviously. Jeremiah's seen it 5 times, with Egbuka getting two, Carnell having one. Um,
I think
one
obviously if they both stay healthy, Egbuka and Smith are going to both be over 1,000 yards
oh, I agree. And I don't know,
easily.
which you might not look back to when we had Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, and um,
Chris Olave.
Chris Olave. And had it not been for an injury to Olave, all three of them would have had 1,000 yards. I mean, that's lofty expectation, but given the number of games we have this season, at least potentially, I don't know that it's out of the realm of possibility that we don't see 3,000 yard rusher or 1,000 yard passers this season. And believe it or not, 2,000 yard rushers. I mean, that is
So
completely in play.
how many yards did you say Henderson has?
He's just under 300.
Okay.
Quinshawn's at 390.
Yeah. They're obviously treating Henderson with kid gloves because it feels like although he's getting the starts, Quinshawn's getting the majority, like getting more carries by at least five to eight a game. It feels that
Well,
way,
and
anyways.
and let's not forget too, Quinshawn. I mean, Travion's broke a couple of decent ones, but Quinshawn's broke off a couple of huge ones.
Yeah.
including one that got called back.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I mean, he would right now, if he had that in the mix as well, he might be pushing 500, 450 yards right now. So, I mean, obviously, very, very balanced offense. Um, Offensive line, you got to give kudos to those guys because they're driving it all.
Oh yeah.
They really
Yeah.
are.
We've had zero issues in the red zone so far this year. Zero. I think that's
Do you know why? Because we've got a quarterback and two running backs can run the ball, and defenses have to protect against that, which frees up the pass.
Will Howard can run the RPO in the red zone really well, and Quinshawn just does not go down on first contact. Just
No,
refuses, absolutely refuses. And the offensive line's just playing better. They just are.
and it's not just the offensive line. Obviously, they are, but you got receivers and running
Yeah,
backs out there. You got
blocking well.
Buka and Henderson out there pancaking guys, and not just Joe Schmo off three, pancaking starting middle linebackers. That's what our receivers are doing out there, Eric.
Hmm.
That's impressive. So let's flip it to the other side of the ball. Let's talk
Do we
about the
have to?
defense a little. You know,
It's
this is a
not as bad.
defense
It's
that
not as bad as what everybody's talking about. I know.
something that surprised me a little bit when I looked at these stats. Do you know who the team's leading tackler is? The guy I thought it was going to be is actually number two.
I thought it would. You would think it's either going to be Lathan Ransom or Caleb Downs.
Sonny Styles leads the team in tackles with 23,
How many solo though?
6.
Okay.
Lathan is right behind him at 20 with 14 of those solo.
So, okay. So here's the thing about that. Sonny's athleticism is making up for his inability to get there
He's
on
getting
time.
back into plays and getting assists.
He's getting assisted tackles because he's athletic enough to get there, but
Yes.
he's not fat. He's not reading the play and anticipating the play well enough to be the one that's getting those tackles.
He's not reading, but he's really reacting well. I think that's the best way to put it.
I think you're right.
Um, Obviously, we've had some success getting home to the quarterback this season. We are up to 13 sacks on the season. That's what an average of just over three a game, 3.25 per game. And surprisingly, again, I would not have guessed this.
JT
Our leading
Tumula is the sack leader.
JT Tuimoloau is the sack leader,
2.5 or
and
3.5.
2.5, 2.5. But how about the two guys or actually three guys who are right behind him with 1.5 each?
The CJ Hicks.
Yes.
Okay. Um, Ty Hamilton.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's someone in between them.
Is it Ty?
The Tyleek is one.
Okay. Tyleek Williams.
CJ is one with 1.5. Actually, there is Mitchell Melton with 2.
Okay. I was gonna say Mitchell Melton was gonna be my third guess because I know he's gotten a. I knew he was in on two. I didn't know if they got half of one or if it was a full. But okay. That doesn't surprise me, and they're both late in games and kind of like trash time a little bit.
Well, they are, but I mean, you look, that still means we're being effective in trash time on
Yeah,
defense.
he's taking
And
advantage of his opportunities.
these other guys, Tyleek, CJ, they're getting time early. Now, CJ, he's getting some early time, but more so his is coming late
Well,
in the game as well.
he was the first one to get a sack this season. He
Yes,
was the first sack of the season, and then was it last week he got the other one
he got half last
or
week. Yeah.
half? Yeah. So okay.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously we're getting home to the quarterback. That's a good thing. Um, and
Now
then turnovers.
interceptions. I think my season prediction of who would lead is leading right now. It is Caleb. Or excuse me, it is Denzel Burke, right?
It is.
Yeah,
He
with
has
two.
2.
Okay.
And the other one, come on.
Who has two?
No, there's one other guy who's got 1.
Okay. Jordan Hancock.
Come on. You and I met the guy, Eric.
We did.
Gabe Powers.
Oh, that's Gabe. Wait a minute. Hold on. Gabe doesn't have an interception.
He got an
Oh, yes, he
interception
does.
against
He Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So Gabe's
I
got an
was in my
interception and
head, I was thinking Garrett, um, I was thinking of
Garrett
Garrett
Stover.
Stover. Um, but yeah, you're right. Gabe Powers does have one.
And
He needs
we've
to play
also
more. He
he
just needs to
does.
play more.
We've also gotten 4 turnovers via the fumble this year as well. Which is something that obviously that was
Sonny Styles
critical.
got the recovery on last week. He has a fumble recovery, and it was who punched it out?
Last week it was uh, bu- 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 Jordan Hancock,
Hancock. Yep.
but Jordan Hancock has one forced fumble. Caden Curry has a forced fumble.
Mm-hmm.
Lathan Ransom has 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, and his fumble recovery was for a touchdown.
Yeah. Yeah. That
So
was that was the
we
Caden Curry fumble that he scooped up.
yes, we can't complain about the turnovers.
No.
As much as we'd like to see these guys get home on every play, if you're averaging 3.5 sacks a game, I mean, obviously it should be more against some of the lesser opponents, but if you continue to average 3.5, 4 sacks a game, while it's not what we expected, I'd be happy with it. So,
Two things. You want three and outs,
yeah, we're getting them,
but if you don't get three and outs, the next best thing is getting a turnover.
and we're getting them.
Um, so yeah, defensively we're doing well. Um, I think we started off really well, and those expectations, I think, the last couple weeks, although we've given up yards, we've only given up 21 points in 2 weeks. Through 4 games, we've only given up 27 points, two
Yeah,
field goals, and 3 touchdowns. That's it.
and honestly, you talked about the yards, Eric. I mean, you look at this, and defensively, we're only giving up what? How many yards per game? I mean, it's not.
Like 200.
Yeah, it's about 200 yards per game. It's not even. It's really for the most part fairly minimal. We're getting teams off the field more. Now we've got room on third down to improve. There has now we got better as the game went on yesterday, and honestly, I think those third down numbers against Marshall and the start
Mm-hmm.
of the game against Michigan State have skewed what those efficiency numbers actually
Well,
are.
and those numbers are going to get challenged this week because
Yes.
Iowa is Michigan light, and I know that that sounds like a dig to Iowa, but it's true. Offensively, they are they're very, excuse me, they are very one dimensional in the run
Yeah.
game, and they have a really good defense, and it's literally Michigan light. Okay,
And
so
they're led by a former Michigan quarterback.
this is a tremendous litmus test to see where this team is at going up against a team that is going to try to attack you very similar to how Sharon Moore's uh, team is going to try to attack us in November. And so I'm incredibly interested to see how we go about this defensively this week. What do we come out in? Are we in our base 4-2-5? Do we have to go to something else because it's not working? Or do we start out in more of a run heavy stop defense at a 4-3-4? Do we throw something crazy out there like a 5-2-4?
Oh, I mean, I could see the benefit of that, but it frightens me.
It's going to be incredibly interesting.
I,
Like,
I
as you
yeah,
guys are gonna hear in the interview here in a few minutes, Joel is confident that Iowa can keep this thing really close, and he thinks Iowa can win this game. I think this game is going to be closer than what we've experienced, but I don't think this is going to be a 55-10 blowout. I would be kind of shocked if it is, but I do think that Ohio State kind of wins this thing in the fourth quarter comfortably, but getting there could be kind of interesting.
yeah. And I just want to throw some numbers out to you. You talked about Michigan Light with Iowa. So on the season, Cade McNamara, the Iowa quarterback, 588 yards. The Michigan quarterbacks combined, 577 yards. 11 yards difference. Rushing, Iowa, 1,001 yards on the season. Michigan, 979 yards on the season. These guys are very, very
Very similar
similar
teams.
teams. And honestly, Eric, I don't know what Iowa isn't the tougher competition simply because they've got a very serviceable, very experienced quarterback.
I'll say Michigan is better for two reasons. Number one, I think Michigan defensively just is much stronger up front, and if they stay healthy. And I also believe that you're playing the helmet, and you're playing a little bit against the monkey on the back, and you're playing a little bit of the head game with Michigan that you're not playing with Iowa. This
Yeah,
isn't this isn't the rivalry. This isn't the team that's cheated to beat you three times in a row. This is a team that has a couple grandpas over on the sideline coaching them. So this is a team you're not lacking for confidence, right? When you go up against them,
what you know what though that could be a scary thing.
it could
Too
be.
much confidence is not a great way to go into this game, especially when I think honestly, I think that Iowa definitely has the better quarterback, and honestly, I'm going to say the better
Well,
running back. I think that Caleb Johnson is a better, more physical running back than what we've seen out of Michigan. Now, part of that could be the offensive line woes up at Michigan right now as well.
um, he's definitely one of the better running backs in the country or in the conference. I'll give you that, but he's not better than what we got. He's not better than what they're
Not better
facing
than
every day at
us,
practice.
not
No,
better than us,
he's not better than
but
what we're
better than what
facing
they
at
have in
practice every
Michigan right
day.
now.
So, um, yeah. All right, guys, we're gonna go to our interview with the 12 Saturdays podcast. So, we're gonna play a quick commercial, and then we will be right back with Joel from the 12 Saturdays podcast. The OHIO podcast is brought to you by Mastermind. Mastermind specializes in 360-degree high-definition mobile video mapping, GIS integration, and traffic safety studies. Mastermind cares about traffic safety and keeping you safe on the roadway. Visit Mastermind at onlinemastermind.com. And welcome back to the OHO podcast, everybody. And as you can see, we're joined by our special guest this evening from the 12 Saturdays podcast, Mr. Joel. He is our Iowa representative over at the College Huddle. Joel, welcome in, my friend. Welcome back to the OHIO podcast.
Yeah, I like to be here. It's always good that we're two states that are very proficient at spelling four-letter words. IOWA and OHIO. We share that. Both are confused on the coasts as being the place where potatoes are grown. So we've got a lot in common as we start the podcast here tonight.
Not too many potato farms in and around Ohio, my friend. And every time I've ever been to Iowa, all I've seen is a sea of corn. So
Yes, there is actually, interestingly enough, there is a potato farm about 10 miles from my house, but it's one of those Cliff Clavin little known facts. There's one farm apparently in Iowa that grows potatoes. So
not a little known fact. Iowa's pretty good at football. They've done well under the Kirk Ferentz era. I go back to, gosh, the 80s, even into the 90s when Iowa had some really good football teams as well. Under the Jim Tressel era, there was some mighty battles back and forth then. And this Saturday could be a very interesting day as well, Joel. As I was on your show yesterday previewing it, you're very confident in what Iowa can bring to the table, rightfully so. They would be undefeated if not for a last-second field goal. And that has not gone unnoticed by Ohio State fans or this podcast as we break this down this evening. But if you would, Joel, real fast, can you give an overview for our listeners and watchers where Iowa is right now into the season and where they're at as a football team coming off their first bye of the season?
yeah, they're 4-1 coming out of the non-conference schedule and a big win over rival Minnesota, where I think it was 31-17. This is where I have a partner, Tori Brecht, who Tori is he's the numbers guy. Like he always knows all of the numbers. So if I misspeak on a score or something here or there, you can just let me know. But we beat Minnesota 31-17, which is always good to bring the pig home. And then that bye week was a perfect timing because Iowa has actually been relatively healthy coming out of their first quarter of the schedule, and that's what you want to be when you're traveling into Columbus. And we're led by a rushing attack that's been completely rejuvenated. Caleb Johnson, the Hamilton, Ohio native, is second in the nation in rushing, behind Ashton Jeanty of Boise State, who's putting up EA Sports numbers this season. And so, and I mean, he did have a big day against Oregon, but the competition hasn't quite been to the level. I mean, but Caleb Johnson went for over 200 yards and 3 tutties against Minnesota, which is a solid run defense. And so I think that's where Iowa fans are cautiously optimistic coming in as just under 20-point underdogs on Saturday. If you look at the number right now, and but everything goes as the offensive line goes. And I think that's where Iowa fans really want to see marked improvement coming out of this bye week.
Yeah, we could definitely relate to that after the last couple of years, struggling with our offensive line a little bit. So you mentioned Caleb Johnson. Who are the other top performers on the offense, Joel?
Caleb Johnson? No, I kid. It's the running back room is strong. Kamari Moulton's a redshirt freshman who started the first game of the season. He got banged up a little bit against Troy, and so he didn't play much against Minnesota. Jazz Patterson got dinged up. He's a sophomore. He played a little bit as a true freshman last year. He's a sophomore out of South Florida who is a bona fide home run threat. Yeah, whenever he touches the football, he was one. Iowa running backs coach Liddell Betts was a high school coach in Florida prior to coming to Iowa, which is his alma mater. Honestly, Liddell Betts, just anecdotally, the best running back on a bad football team probably in Iowa history. He was on Parence's last team, and then he had a great NFL career. And we're really seeing the fruits of his real skilled tutelage as the running backs coach because that running back room is deep. Now, Luke Lachey, obviously Ohio State fans are very familiar with Luke Lachey. He was the preseason All Big Ten tight end, and honestly has had a quiet season. The coach nerd in me, though, can tell you that one of the reasons Iowa is running the ball so efficiently is because defenses are really committing to pre-snap alignment to wherever number 85 is. They are not going to let him get free down the field in a play-action passing game. So where he's not impacted the line, and from a stat standpoint, he's a dominant run blocker, and he's done really good things in the run game. Outside, there's a true freshman, Reese Vanderzee, who is a 6'4" kid from a town about 55 miles northwest of where Cooper DeJean is from in northwest Iowa. And they just they're sneaky athletic up there. That's code for he's a really good athlete as a white kid. And so he's a really good wide receiver. And then we're hoping to see more Caleb Brown, the Ohio State transfer, work his way into the lineup. He was kind of in the doghouse after getting an OWI in the offseason and being suspended in week 1. And then they've been working him back. And Seth Anderson, interestingly enough, who was a big factor last year, hasn't played much. He's been injured, and it's a little bit precarious as to where he's been on the depth chart. No one knows. But some of that also is because of Caden Weechin, who you'll see him on offense, but he's a real weapon in the return game.
Let's flip over to the other side of the ball here real fast, Joel, and talk about some of the standout performers so far early on in the season for the Hawkeyes defensively.
Yeah, so I made my bones as a coach on the defensive line, and Iowa's got some good guys up front. And it really starts, I like the defensive tackles. Y.A. Black is going to play in the NFL for a long time, I think. He's a senior, and he's a really skilled interior defender. But the one I think that stands out to me the most, he had 3 sacks in the first week of the season, is he wears number 95, and that's Aaron Graves. Aaron Graves is as gifted a defensive tackle as you're going to see in the country. Another kid from a town of about 950 people in central Iowa, who truly does have Ndamukong Suh-like ability. Now, I'm not saying he's a Heisman Trophy candidate. That's in no way the parallel I'm drawing. But he is the kind of big-bodied guy who can create an interior pass rush that Iowa hasn't seen really since Mitch King.
Nice,
Any other
nice.
performers on the back end? I know the secondary for Iowa's been really strong
Yeah,
over the years.
Xavier Wampa, who Ohio State fans,
Yeah, we wanted him.
yeah, and there's a lot of Iowa fans who I think would be okay if you had him. He's kind of had a slow start this year, and he found himself benched after the Ohio State game for quite a bit of the Troy game. He gave up a couple big plays on special teams and the back end, and I don't want to speak too negatively about it because it is Iowa's defense, as simple as it is. There is a lot of discipline that is needed, and when you're as gifted athletically as he is, sometimes you can find yourself taking some gambles that don't always pay off. The cornerback position, Jamari Harris has been as strong of a corner as you're going to see in college football this year. Iowa defensive backs always seem to be dinged and at the national level from the talking head perspective because we play zone coverage. And, all the SEC schools are running man to man and it's, big on big and it's showing off your athletic ability. Well, Iowa just makes you throw into tight windows consistently and then they just take the ball away. And that's really, it's truly a unit working back there. And what really makes this unit dangerous in the back seven is that second level of Nick Jackson, Jay Higgins, and Kyler Fisher. When they don't go cash, we will sometimes go to a 4-2-5 where I almost called him Fidel Castro. Sebastian Castro slides into the nickel or into the cash position, which is kind of a big linebacker, or a small linebacker, and he'll cover the slot. And then it's Schulte and Wampa behind. We're also seeing a lot of Cohen Entringer, who was the national viral sensation for being the gunner on the punt in the Big Ten championship game, who whiffed on the tackle on the punt and then ran the returner down at the 3-yard line. So Cohen Entringer is seeing a lot of more meaningful time too, which is impressive because he tore his ACL in bowl prep, and he hasn't missed a game this season. So he came back fast from that torn ACL.
All right, Joel, gonna come at you, come at the coach in you here a little bit. You're the Iowa head coach. How are you going to attack offensively this Buckeye defense?
Well, Kirk Ferentz's friend Mark Stoops gave the blueprint. I think this game is a lot like Kentucky and Ole Miss this past weekend. I know Ole Miss wants to throw it a little bit more than what Ohio State does, but it's all about keeping it close, making the windows as tight as possible on defense and defending the run. Judkins and Henderson cannot get big chunk plays. That's first and foremost. If we can stop the run with the front seven, which I think is possible, and keep it close and make Ohio State have to drive the football. I think that's what Marshall did pretty well in the first first half of the first quarter, is they made Ohio State have to drive the ball. Then Iowa's got a chance because I think Iowa's going to be able to run the ball here. And Cade McNamara, I'm on record of not being the biggest Cade McNamara fan. I think he's got happy feet, and I want to see him stand and deliver the ball into the window. If he can get the ball moving outside the pocket through the play action game and maybe hit some short, easy completions and soften up that coverage, I like Iowa's chances. You talked about the struggles of your offensive line. I think the paradox is the struggles of Ohio State offensive line is you're polishing 4- and 5-star offensive linemen, as where Iowa is dealing with a lot of 3-star, 4-star kids up front who have taken some time to come along. And one player I really encourage Ohio State fans to take a look at is number 70, Bo Stevens. This guy is nasty, and he's big. And Iowa has really benefited from his play coming on strong as of late, because with this Tim Lester zone running scheme, you can have tackles all you want, but as far as good offensive tackles go, if that interior three can't seal that interior gap in the interior second level, it doesn't work. And right now, the three tandem of or the trio of Logan Jones, Bo Stevens, and Connor Colby are really doing a nice job in the run game of sealing that leakage from the inside.
So you talked a little bit about how you're going to look at this thing defensively, and you kind of went to the offense there with your running attack. So
So
maybe share with Ohio State fans what Iowa looks like offensively this year, what they're doing, what they may plan to do. We know defensively you guys are going to be good, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this Ohio State offensive line going up
Mhm.
against this Iowa front seven. I think that's really, to me, someone who likes to watch line play, I'm super excited about that. But flipping over to the other side, Iowa, they kind of get this. They get, at least the last couple years, have gotten this reputation of they're just not good offensively. What I have seen this year is completely different, and I know that has a lot to do with the scheme you guys are running offensively too.
yeah, Tim Lester I think has brought a really unique pro energy to this game. I mean, Lester's 44, 45 years old, so he's younger I think than what people think he is because he is so experienced. You know, he was a head coach at Western Michigan for several years, and he's been all over the place. But at his core, he is a Shanahan guy. Like, so you see a lot of trades, you see a lot of pre-snap motion, but it's not pre-snap motion the way that like a Lane Kiffin or a Steve Sarkisian run their spread attack, where it's trying to create leverage on the outside. A lot of it is forcing a defense to commit to an alignment. And they have to show what they're willing to give up, what they're willing to stay balanced to, and that's where the Iowa running game has been really successful. If you look at a lot of their big runs, they've been out of a two tight end formation with two wide receivers, and the two wide receivers are within 7 yards of the tight end, so it's a tighter look. And they're saying, okay, you got to tell us what you're going to do. And our linemen are able to release and create a lane. And honestly, we haven't had a Caleb Johnson type back since Sean Green. He is what we all thought we were going to get when Melvin Gordon was committed to the Hawkeyes. Like, this is finally we get a guy that I think everybody else in the country is like, why don't we have Caleb Johnson on our team? And it's been a really special thing to watch this offense force defenses to commit.
All right. So speaking of commitment here, I'm going to put you on the spot. What is your score prediction for this Saturday, and why?
It's 24-21 Iowa, and it's going to be a 47-yard field goal by Drew Stevens to win the game. And the why is because this defense is going to keep it close and limit the chunk plays. And I really think Iowa can win the turnover battle. And that's the key. Everything hinges on Iowa winning the turnover battle, taking the ball away more than they give it away. The last time we were in the horseshoe, I think they gave up a blocked punt and they had a sack fumble deep in the or deep in Ohio State territory, so they got a short field. Iowa can't give a short field to Ohio State, and that's going to hinge a lot on Reese Dakin, who is another big-footed Australian who kind of found his way against Minnesota, and he was the Ray Guy punter of the week. So, we get excited about punting up here
Yes.
and up here in Iowa, and I've got a 8-year-old kid who watched almost every snap of the Bears game on Sunday just because he wanted to watch Torrey Taylor punt. So it's it's really interesting how we become fans of punters. I'm a Miami Dolphins fan because I loved Reggie Roby as a young Hawkeye fan. So that's how that it's a generational thing. Punting is winning in Iowa City.
So let me do a follow-up question for you that I'm sure those Buckeye fans who are watching this portion of this preview are probably wanting me to ask. If you lost on a last-second field goal to Iowa State, What has changed to where you're going to come into the horseshoe and win by 3?
The commitment to the running game. They were inside the 5 yard line twice and walked away with field goals in that game because they tried to get cute and throw fades and a bubble screen, I think, and they didn't just pound the ball to the 230-pound running back. And I think it was Iowa was in control of that game for most of the game. And I think they viewed it as a chance to put some stuff on tape, try some stuff out on the goal line because they thought the defense was going to hold. And then the defense didn't hold in the second half. Since that moment, I would imagine Phil Parker, knowing Phil the way that I do, really emphasized how important it was to not give up big plays. And then I know Troy had a couple, but it's going to be Iowa isn't going to give up big plays. They're going to be pretty committed to that, and they're not going to get cute. They're just going to try to run the ball down Ohio State's throat when they get it inside the 10-yard line.
Chris, any other questions, my man?
No, I'm good.
All right, Joel, where can everybody find the 12 Saturdays podcast? Maybe there's an Iowa fan who stumbled on this preview, or there's some Buckeye fans who, as Chris and I have shared in other videos, have friendly friendships with Iowa fans where they share rivalry trophies with one another. That you'll have to get a membership for this channel to find out what that rivalry trophy is. But where can everybody find the 12 Saturdays podcast, Joel?
You can find us at 12 Saturdays 2.0 on all of the places you find podcasts. We're an audio only podcast right now. We're slowly working our way into the video realm, but we have some good content. We have some really good cataloged content too. Last year we were able to have Dallas Clark on our show. We have Scott Docterman, who is one of the national writers for The Athletic. So the background is, I'll give you a little plug, the 30-second version of our show. Tori, my partner, is a former editor of the Iowa City Press Citizen. He's an award-winning journalist and now works actually in journalism in a different way. He works for a university as a communications director. I was a sports radio host, and I have also a journalism background. I ran a newspaper, but also was a football coach at the high school and college level. So, and we've got lots of connections across. In fact, one of my biggest mentors is a guy named Dan Carpenter. He was the defensive line coach I worked under at Morningside, who was a graduate assistant on the 2003 Ohio State National Championship team. So I have a lot of ties to Coach Tressel and Coach Haycock, and they were actually guys who were very influential in my early coaching career. So I like Ohio State's the team I like. One of my first radio interviews was Eddie George on the radio. So I've had a lot of ties to Ohio State and really enjoy that this game has got a little bit more respect on the Iowa side. I think that it's Iowa fans always feel like the Eastern schools, the old Big Ten, never really respected us. And I know that there was a game a few years ago that maybe woke some Ohio State fans up to Iowa knows what we're doing here on the gridiron.
Yeah, well, it was mentioned earlier before you were interviewed. It will always be mentioned because it's the largest defeat Urban Meyer has ever suffered in coaching, and it is the largest loss we've ever had to Iowa in the history of this rivalry. And so, yeah, it will continue to be mentioned. I would be remiss if I didn't allow you the opportunity. I know we did this back in our preseason preview. Can we talk about the Kinnick wave again?
Yeah.
I love it, dude. I absolutely love it. To me, it is the best, if not it's definitely the best new college tradition. I put it in my top 5 college traditions ever. Like, to me, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit, Joel?
Yeah, and it's something that's very important to my wife and I, as our 2 sons both started right after birth. They had to get transferred up to the NICU at the University of Iowa Hospitals, and it's a really important tradition. And I think what makes it so unique is it is completely fan created. It was a Facebook post by a woman in Des Moines who thought, man, wouldn't it be cool if after the first quarter everybody just turned around and waved? And the University of Iowa sports media department got a hold of that and they thought it was a great idea, and it just became a thing. It became a real life thing. And during the pandemic, when there was no season, or when the first couple of weeks when there was no season, when the Big Ten suspended games, fans gathered socially distanced outside of the hospital and waved up to those kids in a simulated, and a simulated wave end of the quarter. It's one of the few times I think in the country that no matter where you are, what you believe in, who you're rooting for, everyone is on the same page. And it's really, really cool. And it's really neat to see the visiting teams buy into it. And no football is being discussed for about 60 seconds on those sidelines. Everyone stops and everyone waves at those kids. And everyone realizes that that is far more important of a battle than anything that's going on that field in front of that hospital. And it's something that's very important to the Ferentz family too. Kirk and Mary, there's a Big Ten special about it. Kirk and Mary's son Brian and his wife, I believe, lost a child, and it was not a public thing. And they've given a lot to that hospital before that event, and they will continue to give. In fact, you could have probably named that the Kirk and Mary Ferentz Children's Hospital based off of the volume of money that they have donated over the years. But that's just not who they are, and they walk the walk. Those kids see that Iowa athletes every week. Guys go over there, women go over there. I know Caitlin Clark was a huge visitor of that hospital. It's a real close-knit relationship between the Iowa Athletics Department and that children's hospital.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate those words, man. I love it. It's on my bucket list. Going to a Penn State whiteout game, right up in there is to go to Iowa City and just wave.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me, it's something I want to experience in my life.
They have a kid captain every week too.
Yeah.
And those kids get out there, and like a lot of them start doing backflips because they're just happy to be where they are, and those kid captains get to pick the song that is played when the wave is going on. So there's all kinds of really neat things that go on, and it's just simple enough that it doesn't get old. It doesn't ever feel over the top. It doesn't ever feel bloated. It's just really tasteful and beautifully done, and it's one of those traditions that I think will go on for a long time. And what I love about that tradition over so many of the other traditions in college football, not to besmirch, the Rock at Clemson when they come charging down the hill, or play like a champion today, which whoop-de-doo, you're Notre Dame. I hate Notre Dame. All these traditions, jumping up and hitting a banner. Yeah, cool. You do what middle school kids do when they go through a door. But it's not football related. There's absolutely nothing football related with it. It is a tradition that is truly human experience. And I think that's something that attaches these Iowa football players to the university in a different way than some other places do, because those guys, they have a human experience to go along with their football experience.
Well said. Well said, everybody. If you're an Iowa fan, by all means, open up your cell phone, go to your apps, whatever you listen to your podcast to.
Don't just be an Iowa fan. We welcome Ohio State fans. Yeah. We talk a lot of crap about Nebraska on our podcast, and I think it's a universal truth that we all can get behind. We just have a lot of fun, Tori and I do, and we actually, this week on our show, we have the color commentator voice for Iowa Hawkeye football, Pat Anger, is coming on, so it'll be good. And he's a longtime Indianapolis Colt, and he's a really colorful character. He's most famous for playing with 2 broken thumbs, and a reporter asked him how that affects his ability to tackle, and he said, "My best friend's my brother's dog, and he doesn't have any thumbs, and he's doing okay." So that's the kind of anecdote you'll get from Pat Anger. So hopefully
Kate Stover like guy.
Don't take the weekends off.
Yeah.
Cal's gonna take a break. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we like we like them farm boys that don't buy into any excuses at all, Joel.
But
So
but Eric, I love to hear that these guys don't like Notre Dame.
Oh, I'm Catholic too. I'm a hardcore Jesuit. Boston College University is my Catholic university.
So
So
so we may not like each other this Saturday, but the two things we can agree on is we hate Notre Dame, and as our friends at the Spartan Savant said last week, screw blue.
yeah, and I will say this though. I want to say that I got to reiterate this. My confidence and bravado has nothing to do with just being an irrational fan. I like Iowa's matchup, and I think what we saw with Kentucky and Ole Miss is the blueprint. It's go on the road, keep it close. I've always said if you can be within 10 points at halftime as a road underdog, you've got a chance. If Iowa can somehow stay in that metric, it's a veteran defense and it's actually a pretty veteran team. So all they got to do is be close, and that third phase of special teams might be the deciding factor. Drew Stevens can kick it from 64, so we've got a big leg, and you got those cool flagpoles to just aim the ball at there at your behind your goalposts. So
yep.
hopefully the only exciting thing for you all is dotting the I before the game, and Iowa walks out of there with a big victory.
Chris, do you have a prediction?
Do I have a prediction?
Yeah, Pain, right?
I knew you were going to say Payne. Everybody,
No.
you look,
No, I think it's going to be a game through the first half, but I like Ohio State to pull away at home. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game than we're used to. I'm going to say Ohio State 31, Iowa 17.
ooh,
Okay.
getting the Minnesota score.
Yeah, so interesting because Joel asked me my prediction yesterday. I went 27-10 Ohio State, and then Joel's at 24-21. So all three of us are, much lower than what Ohio State has been scoring this season. I think that's a compliment to Iowa's defensive prowess. And then, like you said, Joel, if Iowa offensively doesn't put their defense in bad situations, this is going to be very interesting to watch Ohio State work offensively against this team.
I'm not a Will Howard guy either, guys. I'm not a Will Howard guy.
Maybe you will be after this week.
Yeah, hopefully I am because he'll have crapped the bed and then
that
turned it
kind
over
of
4 or 5 times.
I don't think so. I think Will Howard's going to surprise you a little bit. He's more athletic than what I expected him to be.
I'm pretty tight with those Kansas State coaches. They're all Iowa boys. Chris Kleeman's a Cedar Falls, Iowa guy, and I've known Chris for about 25 years, so know a lot about Will Howard. So we'll see.
Excellent.
I gotta be cocky. I can't come into your house and not be confident.
Most people, when they come on here, they just want to come out with it being respectful. I can respect the fact, Joel, that you're willing to come on here and say it's going to be a dub for your team, man. I appreciate that.
When you're the youngest kid, you just sometimes have to let your mouth write checks that your body has to figure out a way to cash, and that's kind of the way I live my life. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, we're hoping.
Well, let me tell you, my friend.
We'll find out what's in that bank account this
for you.
weekend, buddy. We'll find out what's in that bank account. Go check out the 12 Saturdays podcast, everybody. 2.0, sorry, 12 Saturdays 2.0 podcast. Go check that out, everybody. We do appreciate Joe coming on here and being a part of this. Go check out the College Huddle, thecollegehuddle.com. Joel's there as the Iowa representative. We're there as the Ohio State representative. And then go check out our website, theohiopodcast.com. Chris just wrote some amazing articles. Go check those out. The women's hockey team are off and running this season, going to look to defend their national championship. So we will be covering that as well. Yes, Joel.
I got one more plug. So my partner Tori Brecht, he goes by Torby. He writes a column Tuesdays with Torby. He's a brilliant writer, and I want to plug his Substack. He has a great Substack where he writes he puts all of his Iowa columns up there, but he also writes about other stuff too. So he's a really interesting writer. So I want to plug Tori's a Substack as well because he does a great job of articulating on the keyboard that I'm much better at speaking into a microphone. That's how I articulate. So, no, but Torby's, his Substack, you can go just search Tory Brecht Substack and you can find it.
Go check that out, everybody. Yeah, absolutely. And go check out the podcast and enjoy the game this weekend. Um, Whoever you're rooting for, if you're an Iowa fan, if you're a Buckeye fan, enjoy that. Enjoy the heck out of this weekend. There's some really good games this weekend in the Big Ten. And go check out 12 Saturday's most recent podcast. I am on there. So they interviewed me along with some. I'm the least out of the people they interviewed for this podcast, trust me. But it was an honor to be on that podcast with them, and for me to go out there and spew some Buckeye stuff for the Iowa listeners. But it's been a pleasure to have you with us, Joel. We really do appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much.
All right. Till next time, everybody. You know how to do this, Joel. Help us out. OH!
Go Hawks.
IO. Go Bucks.
That was such a disappointment.